everyone. I'm just starting my Periscope now. See if some people will join in. This is my second Periscope. The first one I had some trouble seeing people's comments, so I'm going to try to fix that this time and do a better job. Chime in if you're joining. All right, I'm going to set up here a newsstand. Hey, Clay Diva. I'm going to wait a few minutes. Great, thanks for coming. I'm going to tilt my camera. Well, I've got to tilt it so I can read your comments and then also so you can see what I'm doing. All right, I'm going to get started and we'll see if people join in. My name is Laura. I call myself a clay artist. I do hand building. I've been doing clay since I first touched clay when I was 14, but I'm way beyond that now. And for a long time I did work on the wheel, but now I mostly do hand building. So I've rolled out a slab already. I have a slab roller, a North Star, which I really like. It's more than 20 years old. I've replaced some parts on it all myself, and it's worked well and fits nicely in my studio. So I've already rolled out some clay. Today what I'm going to be making are these little plates that go with this berry ball. So I like to sell these as a set because when you wash your berries and have it over the sink, it still drips a little bit through the holes. So this way it catches it and then someone can take it right to the table and they can put it in the fridge and store it and that sort of thing. So it's a nice little set. So I made a bunch of these, my first Periscope, and now I'm going to make some plates to go with that. So, anybody have questions so far? Where are you guys listening in from? Let me know. Okay. I don't know why this is that I don't see all of the comments, but I'm going to keep going. There we go. Miami, great. Maybe my internet is slow or something. I bet it's nice and warm in Miami. North Carolina, probably there too. I'm up in the Washington, D.C. area, and we're finally starting to warm up. Today it's going to be 50, so that's pretty good. Okay, so first I start with removing the sponge from under my mat. Felt a little bump there. I start with using my rib and just scraping the surface of the clay. I don't know technically what this does, but I think I've heard that it helps with getting the clay particles to just sort of stick together better, especially with hand building. It smooths the surface. I've talked about the fact that I use, you can see in here, I use a lot of texture on my clay, and so I like having surface marks, and I've gotten away from trying to make it look too perfect. I'm trying to get a little bit more organic look, and so I do like having the smooth surface for when I put the stamps on it, but I also will tend to sometimes leave the canvas mark on one side because I think that looks okay too with the way that I do the glaze. If you look, can you see that on the back of this, there is the canvas mark in there, and it just interacts. I used a 2-color process. You can see my stilt marks there, where I put an underglaze, Amico underglaze first, and then I put a clear opalescent glaze on top. It allows the stamping to come through nicely. It pools in all the little right places, and I really like that effect. So anyway, and I always include a sticker on the back of my piece because I sell often in galleries and that sort of thing. So if I'm not right there to tell people who I am, I feel like I have a running start with them being able to find me later on. Not that that stays on there forever, but it's just one more part of the marketing that I do. So I just print those and stick them on. Okay, so I work with templates. I made a square template for this form, and I tend to work in multiples. One of the things I said in what I was going to talk about was tools today a little bit, and I'd like to see if anybody has input on that too. I use a needle tool to cut out my pieces. I have collected many knives along the way for cutting. There's different needle tools. This is a lot thicker. I used this more when I was throwing on the wheel, but it's a lot thicker needle than this one. And this, I think, the smaller one just doesn't drag as much and leave behind things. There's even, this is called a cutter bee. This is a X-Acto knife, kind of, oops, it's not sticking, there it is. That's like a pen. I thought this would be good because I could hold it like a pen, but again with the knives, because I cut curves and that sort of thing, I don't know, it just doesn't work for me. So I have not found, like anything, the perfect tool, and that's why I think we all end up buying more and more and more, because first of all, they're fun to do, but I end up using this needle tool for cutting. So let me see, make it so you guys can see what I'm doing. So I work in multiples. When I roll out a slab, I try to roll out a big slab and cut out a bunch of the shapes of what I'm making. I go between 1/4 and 3/8 thick because I'm stamping this down, stamping this with texture. It kind of presses it a little bit, and that's why I make it a little more on the thick side. And when it presses it, it distorts it a bit. So I then use the template one more time after I've stamped it to do the cut out the right shape before I shape it. Also, there are times, sometimes I will just make a random pattern with my stamping tools and then just cut, just use whatever is there. I'll combine lots of different ones, but these, because it's a square shape, I'm going to be using some square stamps that I have. And I make a lot of my own stamps. I'll cut out a couple more, and then we'll get going on making these. Do you guys hand build? Are you wheel throwers? What? Tell me about what you make. Or using with Periscope, you have to get used to looking up a lot more. Okay, and plus you can see I'm practically blind, and I'm a hand builder. Good. Just the way I'm tipping this. Okay. So the clay I use is low fire. It's Miller 10, I think it's called. I recently changed. I was using standard for a long time, but then I started having some problems with the glaze fitting the and coming apart, coming off of the clay, so that wasn't good. So I'm going to put this aside. Okay, and now I'll just take off this excess too, and you'll see my squares. Yep. So for you guys that are hand builders, what do you use to cut out your shapes? I'd be curious to know if there's anything I'm missing out there. So, okay. Now what I'm going to do is texture these, and needle tool, found objects. Oh, that's a great idea. Someone was saying that, suggested creating something where it's not the shaft, I don't know if that's the right term, the length of the needle is not quite so long so it doesn't wobble. And so I've been thinking about maybe some sort of sewing needle and then cutting it down and making it maybe, can you see that? About that short. So, you know, just, I think it's a work in progress like anything, but of course it doesn't stop me from buying tools wherever I go. So, and sometimes, you know, in places that aren't necessarily just clay tool places. I'm sure I saw some Periscope the other day about how the hardware store and is, you know, some people's favorite place to go. I agree with that. And also, you know, Michael's and AC Moore and all those places too, with the cake decorating section has a lot of wonderful tools for us hand builders anyway. So I make, so how do you have a dull needle when you start, or do you make the needle dull? I'm wondering about that. Just like one of those darning needles, maybe from knitting kind of things. That's what I'm thinking, not something so sharp. So let me show you this. I make a lot of these are all out of clay. I make a lot of my texture tools. And again, because these are square shapes, I kind of pulled out some of my square shaped stamps. I don't think anybody gets it except me that it's a square, but I don't know. When you're in the studio by yourself, you got to entertain yourself. So for me, it's meaningful. Whether that translates to the customers thinking, oh, she put squares on that plate, I have no idea. But anyway, it makes me happy. So that's, you know, that's the theory behind this. And I guess if I have a conversation with someone at a show, I might mention that and then they'll understand that. But I think sometimes we just do stuff because it looks right for us, or we like it, or it makes us happy. So I'm just going to start stamping. This time I'm just going to stamp, as I said, once these have already been cut out, I'm going to go back and have to cut them again because they're going to get a little distorted. So let me see where, here, so you can see, and then I'll move stuff around so you guys can see. I'm working on my, okay, you are absolutely right. Being a rebel and putting a circle, that's good. I should do that. I'm going truly, I'm going with the flow. I like the circle idea. I should do that. I'll do one just for you while we're here. So I just take the stamp. I mean, pretty easy. This one I made just with some, you know, little lines in there, and I'll show you what it looks like once it's done. And again, because I'm pressing, it's just distorting everything just a little bit. So that's that one. I'll stamp out a bunch, so I'll just do a couple like that and then show you the rest of the process. This, if you can see, is the bottom of a shoe. I love bottoms of shoes. If you go in your closet and look, you will find so many patterns. I did a demo yesterday, and one of my tricks I use while I'm demoing, especially if there are kids around, is I make them show me the bottom of their shoe, and I'll make a stamp from that. Which engages them, engages the parents, and that sort of thing. So this was the bottom of a shoe, and it looks so cool once it's on. So with this, I'm pretty random. Okay, there's another one. Let me use one of these. This is a roller. I don't know if you guys have seen these before or made them. This is just made from, oh, my lighting isn't great, a ball of clay, flattened out. You press in a little hole, you know, indentation for your thumb and finger, and you can make all kinds of edges on these. And what's great about these, as you'll see when I use it, this has little pinholes. Again, my lighting, I don't know if you can see that, but I'll show you the difference. So this is really fast and wonderful with texture. So these are some of my favorite tools. I think we all have ones that we go back to. Whoops. So you can see what that does. And again, for me, I like the texture because when I glaze, and it doesn't have to be 2-color process. With a 1-color process, everything pools in the deep crevices, so it just brings it out and looks kind of cool. Okay, let me try one more, and then I'll grab a circle shape that I have, maybe. more. These are pretty fast and fun. This size works for the drip tray, and it would also work as a small little sandwich plate or something. Okay, let me show you. So over here, if you can see, I have this whole little carousel of stamps I've made. And when I'm really working a lot, I tend to make a huge mess, and then I sort of organize everything back again. And, you know, put circles together with circles. Especially if I'm stuck on ideas and don't really have something in mind, I'll kind of clean up the studio. It just gets my creative juices going. So this is the back of a bamboo brush, just pressed in the clay. And this actually is one of my favorite patterns. I would have to go up to I don't know what shoe that was, honestly. Let me look at my shoe today. Okay, here's my shoe today. So see how cool? You can make some really neat stamps out of that. I'm telling you, if you go to your closet after this, you will, and you like texture, it's a whole new ball game of texture ideas and patterns, or just it's something that you can recreate. You don't always have to press your own shoe. So that is that look. I'll do one more circle. That's this one. Kind of like the idea of the square one that I first did. Okay. So now I'm going to take my template one more time, and you can see, well, I hope you can see, there's the edges are just a little distorted. So I'm going to take my needle tool, just quickly go over this again, take off the excess, because now I'm going to, after this, excuse me, I'm going to clean the edges just with a sponge, and then make the plates. So when I make templates, let's see if I can find it. No, of course I can't find it. When I make templates, I try to draw or write on them what they're for so that I can remember if I want to make something again, especially if I found a shape that I really like. So I would write on this berry bowl plate. And I would try to store it with the berry bowl shape too, so that when I go hunting for it, it makes it a lot easier. Believe me, I'm not always organized, but when I do that, it certainly helps, so I can just be creative and not just hunting down what I've lost in the studio. And even just, you know, with the tools on the table, yesterday I had a very small little work table that I was working on with this demo I was doing in a shop where I sell my work, and I still was losing my tools. So I have some people put tape on theirs. I don't even know if I have any of those. Like this, so that they can see them. That still hasn't worked for me, so I don't know why, but it hasn't. Okay, I still lose my tools, in other words. All right, let's move this out of the way. So now I have recut the shapes so that they're relatively square. I don't go too crazy on it being perfect. Again, I'm trying to be a little more organic in my work. I just use a sponge to go along the edge and clean it up and soften the edge so it's not sharp. I don't go too crazy. I know other people have used t-shirts and their finger. I just find, I don't know, a damp sponge works well for me. I'll go on the other side now, too. Sometimes just with my finger, too. Sorry guys, I look down and I forget to look up. So if I've missed your questions, ask me again. I promise I'll try to look up. With my first Periscope, I turned the camera sideways, and for some reason that made it so I could not see any of the comments. So I don't mean to ignore them. So these are cleaned up. Now this is the fun part, the actual making of these. And for that, I use foam, which didn't come into my life, into my pottery life, until relatively recently. I can't even remember. I might have slumped things over forms and that sort of thing, but I never really, until I saw this demonstrated, it didn't occur to me. So what I do is I bought a package of 4 of this size. Some people buy one big piece, and we'll see. It sort of depends. Sometimes I'll try it first with just one. Sometimes by using 2, you get a kind of a deeper lift of the sides of the piece you're using. So you can make the blocks that you're pressing into your shape yourself out of clay. I'll show you one that I made. You can buy these at Michael's if you go to the wood section. I mean, they're really inexpensive, and you can get all kinds of shapes. So this has got a squared edge to it, and this one has a rounded one. So I have to sort of decide which one. I think I'll try both and see. And you could use either side of this to push in, just depending on how much room you want on the sides of your pieces. Let me just see though. So I made this shape out of clay because I wanted to make a bowl, a plate, kind of this triangular shape. And this works well. I mean, I haven't even fired this yet, and I've used it, but I'll fire it. It'll shrink a teeny bit more, so you have to take that into account. But you can use that as well to press into the clay. So I'll start with the sharp edge one, and I just kind of line it up. I'll move these out of the way. You guys see? Just eyeball it, and you just press. And what it does is lifts up the sides. And you're going to take this out. I'm going to add the next layer. Let's let it go a little deeper, and I'll just show you the difference in that. So it's gone up just a little higher. So what I do is grab, get it off. Now you can use cornstarch or something like that on these to help with the release. And actually, this is the first time doing this. I just got a little stamp with my logo on it. So this is the first time I'm doing this. I'm going to just put this now, because I've got the wood in there, just right in the middle. So that's Clay by Laura. So that's good. And I'm going to put it right on my bat, and just to release it, I mean, I'm just gentle. And there's your plate. And I'm okay. So it's a little wobbly, uneven. And again, I mean, I could be totally organic, but that's not, I'm not totally 100%. So I might straighten it out a little. Sometimes I'll take a straight edge, like a ruler or a paint stick, and go just to make it straight. And there you go. So that's the one with the straight. I'm going to try one with the rounded corners, and just, I think I did a straight one on my sample, but I want to look at the rounded corners and see if I like that or it makes a difference. It doesn't. It's all just personal choices and preferences. So again, here's the rounded corner one. I'm going to use the interior part. Just line it up. I'm going to use the two pieces of foam right now. You just press in the middle. Then for me, it's easy to lift up and flip over without messing up any of the sides of it. Take my logo, press that in there, and take another bat. You could have a small piece of wood or something to put it on. And there you go. I think I'm actually liking the sharper corners. Do you guys have any opinions on? I don't know if you can see it. Okay, so there's rounded corners on the inside of that shape and a kind of a sharper corner on that one. I think I'm liking the sharper corner. So again, I'm going to take my straight paint stick, just go around the edges, just to kind of even them up. And then when it dries a little, when it's a little more leather hard, I might go back and wipe the corners, kind of the edges again, just to make sure they're not too sharp. So I'm going to keep going. I've got more of these. I'm doing a show at a strawberry festival, so I figured having berry bowls would be a good item to have for sale. So I made a bunch of the bowls recently. So I'm going to put these away and I'm going to keep going. So hold on one sec. Are there any questions? Let me look at the screen so that I can actually read what you guys might want to know. Anything? Let me show you a couple, before I get going, I'll show you some of my other go-to tools. I have just hundreds of tools around. I really do, and I like them, and they all have potential, but I get into a habit of using the same ones over and over again. This tool is for cutting holes in a let's see, in pots, like for the berry bowl. And what I like about this one, as opposed to one like this, let me turn my camera down a little bit, is, okay, this has the point on the end. This is good if you're going sideways or something, but because I tend to make the holes on this when it's on its form, I want something that can press in and press flat against the form that's underneath it, and this works just really well. And it's two sizes on one, and it comes in some other sizes too. I'm sure I got that at a clay, I don't know who makes this, but I got this at a clay company one time, and these are my favorite ones of that. When I slip and score, I tend to use this. Oh, did you see that, Dorothy? Let me see something here. Is that better? You know what, now I can see it, okay. As opposed to this, I have this. I use this size, which is nice. I make a lot of outdoor sculpture totems, and this size fits the copper pole that I use for putting my totems outside in the ground. I get long lengths of copper pole at the hardware store. I can cut it myself. It lasts outside, and then I stack my pieces, and this is the hole cutter for that. So some tools are for specific jobs. I mean, that's kind of what I thought. Yes, I've gotten all of these at Ceramic Supply locally, and I can't remember these. Let's see. A lot of them don't have a name on them. So, but if you go to, you know, that's like a kid in a candy store if you go there, if you're like me. So, okay, I'm going to get back to showing you again how I'm doing these little plates. So I like this one with the sharper edges. That's what I'm going to use. Just line it up, press it in. This is why I like to work in multiples, because when I'm knocking them out, I mean, I'm a good production botter. I sort of, once I have the system down, I know how to make a bunch of them. So that's I like that part of it. I like the part of sort of figuring out, making the pattern, and it takes me a while to do that. Thank you. Isn't that good? Yeah, the new stamp. Okay, so let me talk about this. Now my new favorite tool. This is, I just received this, I mean this week. This is my logo. And it was made by a company called 4 Clay. And it was as easy as drawing out my own logo, taking a picture of it and sending it to them. And let me show you what it looks like again. They have, you don't have to draw, they have typefaces you can use. This is 3/4 of an inch is the size that you can get 1/2 an inch also. I thought about that, and I may go back and get a smaller one too, but they make all kinds, they'll make any shape of a stamp you want. So for me, someone who loves stamps, if there's something unusual, or if there was a logo, say, of a company that I wanted to make something for, I could do that for them. I've done that in the past, and I've sort of made my own version. So that is just a whole new world, and it took me a long time to get that. But this is my new logo stamp. I do always sign my pieces. I also date them. I know a lot of people don't date their pieces from the standpoint that they think if the date on it is old, you know, past the year when it's sold, that makes it look bad. I try to look at it as it's a collector's piece. And, you know, I don't know that any of my customers have ever really looked at the date on my pieces and said, you know, I'm not going to buy this because you made it last year. I mean, a customer is going to buy something because they like it no matter what. And, you know, maybe that piece was just waiting for them. So that's why I like to date it. And then it's for me, if I go and see a piece, I always flip the bottom of my pieces and look at the dates. It gives me a history of what I've made, and kind of then I can think back of what I was doing in that year, and I can see the progression and stuff. So I encourage people to not only sign their piece because it's a piece of art, you know, whether it's your name, your logo, whatever it is, but also I'll answer, hey Paul, I'll talk about pricing in a minute. But I think it's good to put the date on it too. Pricing is, you know, one of those tricky questions that we all struggle with. And I don't do it totally very scientifically. Thank you. I look at a couple of things. I look at what the market will bear, for one thing. I think of myself as an artist. I know the time I put into stuff. I think about the fact that it's, even though I can knock these out and be fast about it, okay, so that's one thing, but it's taken me years to develop the skills that I'm using. So that needs to be taken into account too. I look at what other people are charging. I also sell my pieces wholesale. So I have to be comfortable with taking half of my price, because once I have my price is my price. I don't change it for wholesale or retail or when I sell it, but that's my price. So I have to be willing to go down to half of that amount. So if it's a $40 mug, I have to be really willing to take $20 for it. But the upside of that is that somebody else, if they've paid you outright, if you're selling it for wholesale and it's 50%, and they've paid you for that mug and it's now their responsibility to sell it, that takes a lot off your plate, and it's $20 in your pocket rather than sitting on your shelf. So I think that's one thing to take into account, is if you were to, even when you're pricing your stuff and you're not doing wholesale, kind of think of that in the back of your head. But the other thing is also with consignment. In my consignment deals, I usually take 60%. Yes, I usually take 60%, and the gallery will take 40%. Hey, Lindsay. Let me just say also, I saw a message from Paul Blaze. Let me give him a shout out. Paul has does something called the Potter's Cast. If any of you have listened to him, you know how wonderful he is at interviewing potters, and I've gotten so many ideas and really gotten insight into people's lives. Just the questions that you guys are asking me, a lot of those get answered by other potters, and what I've realized is we're all in the same boat, and we all are struggling with the same questions. People that in my head I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they're doing so much better than me, or they're doing this or that. We're all really the same. So that's something really comforting about that, number one. Number two, Paul has developed something that's called the Potter's Mastermind, and it's a group of clay people who have joined him and have, we're paying a fee, a very reasonable fee, to really brainstorm together. And we have all benefited greatly, I'm telling you, by being part of this group. So if it's something you might want to take a look at Potter's Business Mastermind and check that out. Sharing is really good in this community, and I saw this on some Periscopes too. There are some potters that don't like to share, but most potters do, because one thing that I've realized, I think everybody realizes, even, somebody said this the other day, even if someone takes exactly what I'm doing, uses similar stamps to mine, you're putting your impression on the clay, and that's what you're selling, is you. You could make the exact same shape, but somehow it's going to be different. It's going to be unique to you, and you're going to make certain choices along the way, and that's what's great about having so many potters out there in the world. There's room for everybody, and it's great to share. So, okay, enough going on and on. Hey guys, okay, so I'm going to use this one more time to press down, and again, I'm using this squared edge. I have two choices. For those of you that maybe joined in late, I got these at Michael's in the block in the wood section, and oh my gosh, there's so many shapes that you can use, and I'm using this to press into the clay to make my plate. I'm making little plates that are going to look like this, that go with this. Now, one of the choices I made, I'll just talk to you about this a little bit. Because I knew I was doing a square bowl with a round shape, I made a square bottom on the bowl so that it would fit in here, tuck in here nicely. That was just one of the choices. You can make any shape you want on the bottom, and you could use a different style of plate. But for me, those were some of the choices I made when I was creating this piece. And it's a give and take. This doesn't happen the first time I make something. I make lots of mistakes. Even through the glazing process, we all have our piles of stuff that didn't work out, but you have to start somewhere. So I've pressed in here. I'm going to flip it over. I'll show you one more time. I have my new logo stamp. It says Clay by Laura. Can you read that? Yay! Again, that's from forclay.com. Little advertisements all over the place. But that's what's good. It's fine. See, it is. I mean, that's why I wanted to sort of talk about the tools. I think we all have our favorites, and find out about things like even just using this drywall board I don't know, I used just pieces, excuse me, pieces of wood for a long, long time. And I don't know, somebody I saw was using the drywall. I thought, oh my God, that's so smart. I happen to have this fun little tape to tape the edges. I have it in different sizes, so I just cut it with an X-Acto knife. So here, yes, the colorful tape, that was my daughter's. I inherited that. I don't know, I have a stash in my studio. So there's that. Now I'm going to straighten. I've showed, I use a painter's stick just to straighten up the edges just a little bit. Again, I want it to be organic, but I still have a little bit of rigidity, whoops, in my arsenal. So there's that. I'll make a couple more, and then I'll be done. Anybody else have any questions? Oh, here's another one I'll do. Oh, there you go. Yes, drywall is free. Well, and you know, that's another thing that here's another thing I learned in through the mastermind, which I think is no secret, but it was a good idea, and I hadn't really thought of this. There are a lot of packaging supplies you can get by going to your neighbors or businesses and oh, how thick is my slab? Okay, my slab, I go between 3/8 and 1/4. I go closer to 3/8 with this. Let me show you something, kind of the before and after. There's, I don't know if you can see much of a difference. Yes, and I'll show you the stamp. Can you see the difference in the edge there? Because I stamped this after I had rolled it out, it gets a little narrower, probably a little closer to the 1/4 inch. It's a little more than a 1/4 inch. But so I go a little heavy on that because I stamp. So that's the circle stamp. I make a lot of these stamps myself. And if you go back and if you joined in late and want to go back and look in the beginning, I showed some, but I'll show them again. Shoes, I said before, are a big source of pattern for me. If you look at the bottom of your shoes, this is the back of a bamboo brush. Let's see. This one is from a shoe. And it's great, and I use it a lot. I mean, there's so many ways you can do it. Here, I'll show you you guys one more time. If you can look down here, you see those little circle things. Whoops. Those are filled with stamps I've made. And almost every time I fire, I'll create some new stamps. Thank you. Yeah, I've got a great studio. I am so blessed and lucky. I moved here a couple years ago, and I got an entire basement as my studio. The twirly holders are from the good old hardware store. These are from Home Depot. You have to go ask. They don't always have them on display, and it was in the tool section. It's meant for holding nails and all that sort of thing. Yeah, and I am thinking of doing a Periscope on making stamps. We'll do that next time. I did think of that. So I'll demonstrate how I actually make the stamps. So let me show you this one more time. Okay. Just going to press down. There it is. And it kind of sticks. It doesn't stick too much. You can use cornstarch on your pieces if you want to have it really not stick. And I do that sometimes. I just put it in an old sock. Here's my old, actually I made that sock, but I never really wore that sock. So that's my cornstarch in there, and I would just tap it on the wood so it doesn't stick. But I find it doesn't really get distorted. Let me find. It doesn't really get distorted much when I take it off. You see, I'm really careful. I'm not yanking it off. I'm just sort of gently. Once it releases from here, it comes off pretty easily. So there you go. And again, straighten the edges. And I'll go back, I said this before, I'll go back when it's leather hard and just clean up the edges again, just soften them one more time. I did that in the very beginning after I started them. What's the size of the plate? Okay, I measured this beforehand. The finished plate is almost 5 inches. I mean, it's almost, can you guys see? No, you can't see the light's bad. So it's about, with the edge to edge, it's about 4.5. If it was laid out flat, it would be about 5. My template, just with shrinkage and everything, is a little, I'm sorry, see if you can see that. Little over 5, like 5 1/4 almost. So I do, allow for shrinkage. But the finished plate is about 4.5 by 4.5, and that's what is fitting for this. But you can make dinner plates. I made a set of plates for my daughter, and I've used ovals, I've used rectangles with this method. You can really, and again, I just recently kind of caught on to this. I used to just slump pieces over things. I had pieces of styrofoam and that sort of thing, but this pushing down thing, the trick about it, what I have found is you just want to be careful with the edges. Actually, let's see, I've got this shape too. I'll do one more in this shape just to show you something a little different of how that looks. But that's the trick with this style, is making sure that the lip isn't too big, because then it gets a little wobbly when you're pushing it down. So let me see if I can cut out. No, I'm going to get another piece of clay. Hold on. Just to show a different shape. So here, can you see? So this has a little bit of a rounded edge to it. And I thought about maybe changing, excuse me, to this. So I cut out the shape, okay, with a rounded edge. I am going to use, grab something here. I'm going to use this stamp. Again, this, I don't know what I made this from, something with circles that I pressed in there. But I'm going to press down, so I love texture, that's what I've been saying all along. The way I glaze, it just brings the texture out. Now, this has gotten a little distorted because I was pushing down on it, so I take the template one more time just to get it back into shape and cut off those little extra edges. Okay, I clean up the edge with a sponge on the right side and the wrong side. Then I take my foam. I'm going to use, I'll use the straight edge on this one. So I'll line it up. Can you guys see that? So I just sort of eyeball. I mean, if you tend to look over it, that's the best way to do it. And I push down. So what this does, I'm going to put my logo on there. To get into the habit of doing this, so that's why I'm doing it every time. So this is a little different. It's a little bit higher, it's rounded compared to, well, compared to that one. The wooden blocks are from Michael's, and any of the art supply stores, AC Moore has a really good selection of the shapes of these, and another place would be Joann's Sewing and Crafts. They have a really good section of that. And I showed earlier, let me just show you again. You can make your own out of clay. I made this shape because I made a plate in kind of a triangular shape. So this is a little smaller than the plate, and I just made it about 1.5 inches thick, and I'll fire this, and then I can use that over and over. So this is great because they're sort of ready-made and they give you ideas of what to use, but you can make your own. I've used styrofoam. Let me get that too. Hold on. You can use styrofoam, and what I do is I cover it with painter's tape because that way it doesn't get all that little styrofoamy leftovers on it. So, and this doesn't stick a lot either. I mean, sometimes I'll put the cornstarch on here, but so the shapes are endless. It's something that's really fun to play with. I got the foam probably at Michael's, or I might have gotten it at Walmart. If you just go into the sewing section, or you look, you know, if you have an old cushion that you're not using, and look and see if it's this kind of foam. It comes in all different thicknesses. I kind of like having the two. I have actually 4 pieces like this, so I can make it just this thick, and it just makes the rim just doesn't come up as high. So I think that's probably it for now, guys. Is there anything else? I like the idea of doing a broadcast. I'll do one in a couple days on making stamps, because that's really, oh my gosh, it's so much fun. Let me show, okay, one more thing. So yesterday, when I was doing my demo, here's one I made from the bottom of a little kid's shoe who loved it. And you know, you can make them like this, all kinds. So anyway, thanks. I'll see you guys soon out there in Periscope land. Appreciate it. Bye.